Well, gee, I'll bet it's been, well, it's over 10 years since Steve gave me this water column.
Oh, somewhere in there.
And we just did a show on how he constructed this and why he gave it to me and as a gift many, many, many years ago. Anyway, it now comes time to paint it and install it in the railroad.
Oh, boy, what a job.
And I'm doing that current series on I Hate Painting. It's because it's intimidating. You can really take something nice like this water column and completely screw it up if you're not careful. And in this case, there's all these little fine details and chains and cables. And the last thing I want to do is gunk that up with heavy paint.
Right.
One of the things about working with metal over plastic is it has to have a decent primer.
Oh, that's true.
Or the paint won't stick to the metal and you can very easily scratch it off. You can just scratch it off with a fingernail. So the very first thing to do is get a proper primer on the metal. So this is the primer that I've been using and I like it. Duplicolor Paint Shop Primer. I've been using Eastman's self-etching primer for metal, but I've had some problems with it, especially if I apply it over plastic, which I've tried, and it didn't work out well at all. It's all pre-thinned, which is nice, so you can just spray it. I still tend to thin it slightly, but for the most part, you can just put it in your color cup and press go, and away you go. A couple of general rules. I always put, especially primer on, in very, very thin coats. Not that I'm that concerned about it running, but again, what I'm trying to do is not cover up any of these details. I've got this chain and this other stuff, and I want to make darn sure that I don't get so much paint down in there that it gets into the chain links and stuff and creates globs of paint down in there. So I'm just very, very lightly misting this on here. I'm using the trigger on the double action gun so that I'm applying a bit more air than paint. So it's a very, very light coat. And I just keep going back over and over and over. As long as I'm not using so much air that it's drying before it even hits the model, which is a potential problem. At any rate, this is my goal, a nice coating of primer paint on here so that everything is covered with the primer, but nothing is down into the details, obscuring any of the details. It's a light enough coating on here that there are no globs of paint covering up any of these really fine details. Just a coating on here. You can see in some places there's sort of a sandy texture to it, and that's where the paint actually did dry before it hit the model, and it creates this kind of powdery effect on there. And I found that you can just sort of wipe that away, typically speaking, with a soft cloth. Now, before I start putting color on here, I want to check how it's going to fit next to the track, because there's a piece missing that I haven't built yet, and that's the little foundation that it sits on that also has a metal top that the whole thing bolts to. And so I need to figure out where exactly it's going to sit next to the track. I've drilled a hole here, but I don't think it aligns just perfectly. I don't have anything connected to like electric motors. When I'm going to use this stuff, I just manually manipulate. I reach in and operate it. But I do want the water column to be functional so that it lines up with the tender and all of this mechanism works. So the first part of the base is going to be the concrete platform that the whole thing sits on. And I've constructed that out of 2 layers of black foam core. And then I've beveled the edge just on the belt sander. Here on the Nevada Northern, there is a concrete, there's a whole sort of sump area underneath here made of concrete with a metal top on it. You can't see the concrete very well here. It's going to be more exposed on the model, but you can see that the entire water column bolts to this metal plate, and the metal plate sits on top of the concrete foundation. So I need to check the alignment now. I'm using a couple of different tenders, mostly the tender from the C18 here. And I just want to position the water column in such a way that the the spout lines up with the opening, the hatch on the water tank. You can see that it doesn't actually line up with the original position that I thought it was going to be in, but it clears everything, nothing's going to run into it, and it lines up with the water hatches when it's sitting right here. So this is the final position. So now to build the metal plate that the water column is going to bolt to, and I'm just using a thin piece of evergreen styrene that I can easily glue to my foam core, my double thickness of foam core. And with that, I think I'm ready to start shooting some color on the whole thing. I'm using Chama flat black, and this is mixed down a bit. I rarely shoot things with actual pure black. So I've added just a hint of the gray that you can see in the background there to soften this up. Just make it slightly less black than it was when I first bought it. And then I'm also using, you can see it in the background there, Model Master enamel paint in their rust color. It's my favorite rust color. Unfortunately, it's no longer available. So first up, a few light coats of the grayed out black. You can see as it's going on here, it's almost a pure black, but just slightly gray. And I'm using very fine coats so that I'm not getting anything down into the mechanism or anything into these chains or anything. I want everything to be nice and clear of any fouling of the mechanism by paint being down in there. Of course, that's unrealistic. The counterweight, which is sitting there on the main shaft of this thing, has to be able to slide up and down, and that means I'm going to have to remove the paint there. It's a pretty simple thing to do, and it takes it back down to the bare metal, which is exactly the way it is on an actual water column, because the counterweight's sliding up and down. There's no rust there, it's just bare shiny metal. But as you can see, I'm not getting any paint globbed up in the chain or any of that. So those will have to be freed up, and then also I'm going to remove a little bit of paint on the running surfaces so that they're bare metal as well, just for appearance sake. And now just barely lightly misting some of the Model Master rust color, working from the top mostly, because if you look at an actual rusty object where the sun is hitting it, it's more rusty. The metal is a darker color in the shaded areas where the sun doesn't hit it. So I'm trying to duplicate that effect by very lightly misting the rust color, mostly from above. I definitely want the rust, the light mist of rust over the entire model. I just want it to be a little more conspicuous, a little tiny bit heavier in the areas where the sun would be hitting it. But I don't want any of these areas to be the pure weathered black color. Almost, but not quite. So getting back to the reference water column here on the Nevada Northern, you can see how there's a lot of variegation between the rust and the weathered black. And that's what I want to see here. I want to see heavier rust in some areas and almost the pure weathered black in other areas. And then live with it for a while. Go lighter than you think you might want to go, and then live with it for a while, because you can't take stuff away, but you can always add more rust in. So I want to just stop here now and set this aside and live with it for a few days and see if it does in fact feel right to me. And then of course I need to paint its little foundation. So I've painted the concrete part just in a darker gray, and then the metal sheet in the same technique with a lot more variegation in the rust, because this plate down here is going to be wet all the time because of spilled water falling on it. And now double check the alignment with the tender, make sure that the mechanism still lines up with the water hatch, and then I'm going to go ahead and drill the hole and for permanently mounting this. It'll be removable. I don't want it to be so that I can't remove it, and it also needs to be able to swivel and so on. So it'll just be in such a way that I can lift it out and get it out of harm's way when necessary. And now to free up the mechanism so that it easily goes up and down, you can see that yes, there's paint down in the pulleys and on the cables that run the whole thing, which is exactly what I wanted. That's the appropriate look. But I want to now remove paint from any of the running surfaces where they would be not rusty, they'd be bare, shiny metal, and also make sure that all the little pulleys rotate properly and that the counterweight slides up and down. And right now the counterweight won't slide up and down at all because of the paint that's on the main shaft of the water column there. So I've got to remove the paint around the area where the counterweight needs to go up and down. So the cables, which are actually just a very fine string, have gotten a little bit stiff with the paint. I just need to make sure that everything is flexible and moves easily. And then I need to remove that paint on the main shaft here where the counterweight needs to slide up and down. And I'm doing that by simply sliding the counterweight up and down in that area and very gently removing the paint. I am going in and scraping slightly, but for the most part I'm able to get the paint off simply by operating the mechanism. And then I'm going to clean up those edges by putting the counterweight in its fully down position and touching it up with a paintbrush, and then the fully up position and touching it up with the paintbrush so that it's clearly, scraped down to the metal exactly where the counterweight operates, but it's rusty everywhere else. On the prototype, you just grab that handle on the end of the spout and lift it up and down, and the counterweight goes up and down, equalizing the weight of the spout. So all you have to do is just grab that handle and it should go up and down simply. It's not going to work quite that way, I think, on the model, but I'm going to try to make it work mostly like that. There's also this little roller on the top that has to be free to operate. But so far, everything seems to be coming together. The whole mechanism is operating exactly the way it's supposed to. And the counterweight always wants to bind up slightly, so I'm actually going to put a drop of lock lubricant on here to help the counterweight slide more easily up and down. But like I say, I'm not really planning to operate this. I just want it to be operational. And now on to that part of the painting process that I actually enjoy, I think.
Okay.
And that's the weathering.
Oh, that part.
Yeah, because once you got a decent paint job on here, could you just muck it up a little bit?
Right, just don't go clear overboard, because you can go overboard with weathering too.
And what I have found is just go very subtly, just do a little and then wait, and do a little and then wait, because if you go too far, you can't go back.
That's true of most things,
The key is knowing when to take the crayon drawing away from the 3-year-old.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, the first step that I'm doing here is I'm brushing on just a very, very dilute color. It's mostly just water with a little teeny tiny bit of black paint in here, black water soluble craft acrylic that will soak down into the cracks.
Ah.
And it just gives it that kind of dirty, messed up look.
Right.
That first part of weathering, and then I'll come back over with a dry brush. So that first one is a very, very wet brush, and then the next thing is you put a little paint on the brush and then you wipe it off on a towel until it's almost like there's no paint left on there, and then you just keep brushing and brushing and brushing, and there should still be enough paint on the brush. The little tiny bit comes off and you still get a little teeny tiny bit of color, but you just keep working it back and forth and forth and back. Right here I'm touching up that area where I scratched the paint off the metal so that the counterweight would work, and now I'm just dry brushing in to cover up the damage and the scratches, while at the same time just adding kind of a surface rust.
I see.
And by just dry brushing, and here again it's just over and over and over and over again, and then take the painting away from the 3-year-old and wait.
Yes.
And see if you want to add some more, and then take it away and then wait. And just the key is don't go too far.
Right.
And just keep going in very, very small increments. Typically this is done with a lighter color. First was a darker color with the wash, and then coming back with lighter colors over the top of everything so that you're kind of hitting the highlights.
I see.
And in this case, the more of the lighter colored surface rust. And you can see I'm just scrubbing it back and forth because there's almost no paint at all left in the brush.
Right.
And I just want to rub it back and forth. But if you look at that, that's just a lighter color, and you can see where the lighter colors have just stuck to the edges and certain areas.
Wow.
And it just kind of highlights everything.
I see.
So the dark colors soak in, the light colors sit on the surface. Back to our reference images here at the Nevada Northern, the water tank, the water column there. And you can see how much variation there is. And there is that surface rust.
Right.
And that sense of dark colors that are kind of soaked down into the cracks. And that's the exact look that I'm after.
Years of accumulation of water.
And speaking of water, as I'm putting on those wet coats, you can see all that wet, water down there.
Mm-hmm. Can you preserve that?
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yes.
Unfortunately, it dries out.
Yes, it sure does.
So here's my attempt to preserve that. What I've done here is I've just brushed a clear coat, a gloss coat, on top of there to try to make it look wet.
Right.
And it sort of works and it sort of doesn't. I kind of like it. But then after it dries out, it goes like that.
It sure does.
It still just dries out. I like the look.
Right.
But it doesn't look wet. And I've got to figure out some way, because I do want this whole area around here to look wet.
I wonder if colorless nail polish would work.
It might.
It might, because if it's thick enough, if you will, it dries pretty shiny and clear.
Because that's the goal right there. That's actually just wet right there.
Yeah.
But then it just dries out and it goes back to looking dry and rusty, which is a nice look, but I want it to look wet. And I thought I had it there for a while, and so I set this in place, and there's the wet look right there.
Right.
Within 2 days, it was all flat again.
Oh, dear.
Because you're applying it over the flat paint, and it just kind of wants to go back to being flat.
Unless you want it flat, and then it'll go shiny. That's why I don't like painting.
So anyway, but this whole area, the ballast, everything here has to look sopping wet. Because there at the Nevada Northern, where they've got the water column, everything there is just a big soggy, soppy, muddy mess.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's the look I want. So I want to make everything around here look wet. The ballast, that whole area down between the tracks. I mean, there's the look right there on the Nevada Northern.
Oh, sounds like you need to get your water going again.
And if I was trying to not make it look like that, and I was just using my dilute white glue to try to ballast, it would come out looking like that if I didn't want it
shiny. Yeah, go figure.
Anyway, I think the thing to do now is to set this aside, because there's no point trying to make the base of this look wet when the whole ballast and everything has to look wet. So when it comes time to do the ballast, then this whole area is we're going to have to figure out some way to make the whole area look wet. But there's no point just trying to do the base of the water column. Let's just put this off and just do it all at once.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
So let's move on to building the proper water tank. You may have noticed there's a water tank sitting over there. That's a placeholder.
Oh.
And now comes time to build the actual water tank. That's the next project up. And hopefully everybody's going to want to follow along with that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so you want to be a subscriber to the channel. And the easy way to do that is by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here on Tuesday.
Right.
See ya.
We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.